running late the entire time. So real quickly, just want to introduce our first speaker. Before I do that, we have already paid for the dining hall. So if you want to go get a drink during our time with John, go for it. Want to get a little snack? You need to go to the bathroom? Feel free to do that. I know we've got kind of a tight space, but if you want to just sneak out and do that, you are welcome to do that. We'll be in here until after lunch, so that's totally fine. Real quick, this is John Edlin. He is, you live currently in Kansas City area, right? So he is a dynamic speaker, and he helps individuals face and work through those life challenges with confidence and purpose. So he has a really interesting story to tell. So after his house was completely destroyed by a tornado, John found himself in a moment of total loss. And instead of giving up, he discovered a way to not just survive adversity, but to grow through it, which is totally in line with our leadership as well. And so now he takes the time to share his story and a practical 3-step method to help others like yourselves live a full life no matter what you guys are going through. So hope you guys can take something from his time here with us today and connect that back to your life experiences. So
thanks
for
Megan.
being here, John.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, we have a little bit of class participation this morning, so we'll start off with saying who has been in a tornado watch. Raise your hand. Okay, good. Who's been in a tornado warning? Okay, who knows the difference between tornado watch, tornado warning? Okay, what would you say that is?
So like tornado watch is like there's like that like kind of like activity for tornado, like the things that are leading up to it, and then warnings like when they like spot in rotation.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, all the ingredients. But you guys are way ahead of where I was when I was your age. I grew up in Olathe, Kansas, right there. If you're not familiar with Kansas City. And we always had tornado watches, tornado warnings. I didn't really pay much attention to them, but whenever a tornado warning would come up, I was lucky enough to have a finished basement with the TV, so it was kind of exciting. Got to go downstairs, and I would turn on the TV and watch these guys. Anybody know who these guys are from Kansas City TV? No? Okay. Brian Busby and Johnny Rollins. I always wanted to be Johnny Rollins. Johnny Rollins is the guy who flies in a helicopter. So we get downstairs, and we'd be watching Brian Busby tell us where the storm was going to be at. And then Johnny Rollins, sometimes if it was a nice day, like he would get out there and be able to film the tornado. It was just a really cool thing to see. And I loved tornadoes, or at least I thought I did. Never been with anybody who had been hit by a tornado, never had any close calls or anything like that. Fast forward to 2020. And moved to Nashville. My wife was a singer-songwriter, so living the dream out there. My kids, who are actually in the camera crew right now, they were 5 and 7 at the time. And so we were out there living the dream in this little place called Donaldson area right there. It's about 10 miles east of Nashville. So it's a typical early March morning, typical March night. We'd put the kids to bed. And my wife was scrolling through her phone. It was about 10 o'clock on March 2nd, 2020. And she said, oh, there's severe weather. What would we do if we got hit by a tornado? And I said, oh, babe. I was like, Nashville tornadoes aren't anything like Kansas tornadoes. They're not going to go and be so destructive. They're real weak tornadoes. We live in a valley. They just kind of skip on the hill. So even if one came at us, it would just skip right over us. Famous almost last words, right? Because later that night at 12:55 a.m. to be exact, I get this on my phone. This isn't the exact one, but it's like it. I'm sure you guys have all received something like this. Even then, I'm like, okay, Nashville, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what real tornadoes are. Didn't really think much of it. But I did decide to get up, decided to look at the weather on the TV, and the meteorologist was freaking out. And she was like, there's a confirmed tornado on the ground downtown Nashville. It was right at the 5 Points area. If you're familiar with Nashville, there's a 5 Points area, and it's about 10 miles away from us. So I thought, okay, well, if it stays on the ground and heads directly east, it's going to hit us. So I woke up my wife and I said, hey, there's a tornado warning. Let's grab the kids and put them in the hallway. We didn't have a basement, so you go into the innermost part of the house. And we grab the kids, of course, 5 and 7, they're sleeping and they don't know what's going on. And our hallway, all the doors shut, which was actually kind of nice. So I started to shut all the doors, and I looked out one more time before I shut that last door to look at the TV screen, and then all the lights went off. And then you could hear that sound like they talk about, like the train, but it was more like 5 jet engines coming over the hill, just filling up your lungs with this vibration of extreme terror, honestly. And so I look at my wife and I said, it's coming. I slammed the door shut. She's got my 5-year-old son in her lap, and my daughter's laying on some pillows that we had put out, and I get on top of her, holding the back of my head, like you learn in school, you know, you're supposed to go back, hold your head. And then all the windows pop, 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 pop. My ears popped, and the most intense amount of wind came right over us, shooting insulation, broken glass, broken wood underneath the door, just shooting up my back. And we're getting sucked back and forth in between these 2 doors, and I just know that this door behind me is going to let go at some point. And it's kind of that feeling when you're on an inner tube, when you're on the back of a boat, you know, and you're on the inner tube, and you feel that place where you're like, okay, I just gotta let go, it's too much force. And that's where I was at. I was just about to say, okay, this is it, I'm gonna be ending up in the front lawn, and I hope my family's okay while I'm thrown out into this tornado. But then it just stopped, just like that. And what was probably 3 seconds felt about like 30 minutes. And I looked around and everybody was okay, even the family dog, which had somehow made its way in there, because honestly I didn't really look out for the dog, which I wish I would have. But she was fine. I mean, she made it in there, and we look around, we're all in shock, and nobody's crying or anything. It's just like shock, and we smell the propane, you smell the broken wood, and you're just like, what? Your mind's trying to process what just happened. I was the only one with shoes on, so I said, I'm gonna get the kids' shoes, because there's just glass everywhere. I said, I'm gonna get the kids' shoes. So I open up the door to their room, and there's just no walls, no ceiling, orange sky, and then you can see the neighborhood's just complete destruction. I just shut the door, and I look at my wife, and I said, okay, their room's gone. And everybody's kind of looking at us like, what, you know, my kids and wife, what are you talking about? I was like, I'm gonna see if I can get your shoes. So I open up the door to our room, brick wall on top of our bed, no walls, no ceiling. And I think, well, I really gotta get her shoes, so I jump on top of the brick wall, get to the closet, and luckily her shoes were in there intact, so I grabbed those. And then I went back to the kids' room, grabbed their shoes. And you think at that moment, like if you watched Hollywood, you would think sirens and, you know, here comes all these firefighters to come and save you and get you to where you need to be, get you safe out of this home, because the home is falling apart. There's glass everywhere, so I'm just kind of waiting for them. I was like, well, maybe they don't know, I'll call them. You know, I'll call 911. So I dial 911, busy signal. So I started calling my cousin who lives 10 minutes down the road, didn't wake up. Called my dad, who's back in Kansas City, and just said, and he picked up. I said, Dad, we've been hit by a tornado. I need you to call Jamie, my cousin, until he picks up so he can come and get us. So he called and called and called. Luckily, I got that text that said he's on his way. No fire trucks, no policemen, no anybody. And honestly, all the neighbors, we were on 1-acre plots, so we weren't like real close to each other, but no neighbors got out either. It was too dangerous, and everybody, I think, was still in shock. And so my cousin comes, gets like 3 blocks away before, you know, he can't get there anymore, and we climb over power lines and telephone poles and all those things in order to get to safety. And when I got in my cousin's truck, it was just like all the adrenaline went up. I just looked around and I was like, wow, can't believe we're alive. So this, you may be kind of imagining what the house looked like. This is what the house looked like. That's our room right there, or my kid's room, and that's where that wall's broken in is exactly where my daughter's bed was. And then I didn't have pictures of the back side, but just wanted you to at least see the front side of it so you can kind of see what I was talking about. But I didn't come here obviously today to just tell you about tornadoes or tornado safety. I came to talk about overcoming adversity. So this is the story of what happened in the adverse situation, but it's what happened after that, the 5 years after that, where I started to put together this method on how to overcome adversity that I want to share with you today. So first, let's talk about adversity. Most of you probably know what it is, but I had to look it up just to make sure I was using the right word. And it's a state or instance of serious or continued difficulty or misfortune. So for me, luckily it was an instance, something that happened right away. But as you can imagine, after a tornado, there's all sorts of different things that happen to you. psychologically and just trying to figure out all the logistics of rebuilding your house and rebuilding your life. So we'll go through a little bit about that today through this method that I call the PSI method. So power, smart, and important. We're going to unpack all three of these today. Who can tell me what PSI stands for when you're thinking about a tire?
Pounds per square inch.
Yep, perfect. So that's the same idea with this, right? So when you look at a tire and you see the PSI, you don't want to overinflate it or the tire will blow up. You don't want to underinflate it or it'll be flat. So in order to overcome adversity, you need to remember these three things in order to live a full life and to be able to get through this. Because when you go through adversity, you're going to have a little bit of a flat tire. I felt like I had a flat tire for a long time after this happened. But you also don't want to overinflate, think you're too important or think you're too smart, right? Or that you have too much power. So we're going to walk through each of these and unpack each one. And I'm not going to talk just about a tornado, because sadly, life happens and there's more adversity. And there was more adversity that came after the tornado. So my family and I tried to hang out in Nashville, rebuilt the house and all that, but just couldn't get back to that neighborhood, couldn't live in that house again, honestly couldn't live in that city again, just done. Both of our parents, my wife and I's parents, are in Kansas City, and so I got a job back in Kansas City so we could be closer to family. And I'm so glad I did, because in 2023, not too long ago, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so I got the call, and we knew that she had a lump in her neck and she was going to go get it tested. She's 75 years old. She was a little worried about it, but thought it'll probably be okay. And she had that call, and some of you may have been on calls like this where it's like, hey, it's cancerous and it's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 2. We're going to look into treatment. So of course your heart sinks. You don't know what to say. So, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, love you. Like, we'll be praying for you as you go through this. And then you get off the phone, then you open up Dr. Google, and you're like, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, stage 2, what's the success rate? And it came back 77%. I was like, awesome, okay, still got my mom with me. Except for the fact that she didn't really want to do treatment. She didn't want to go through being at the hospital all the time. She had been a nurse, she had been a hospice nurse, she knew what it was like to spend your days in the hospital. She wasn't in great health, so she wasn't sure that she would really hit that 77% because she's 75. So of course with that, you get a lot of confusion and maybe a little bit of anger, like why wouldn't we want to fight for us? Why wouldn't we want to hang around? And my sisters were really upset. And I was talking to my sister-in-law, and my sister-in-law said, I knew she didn't say this because I knew this, but her sister had passed away from an aggressive cancer, which was only 32. My sister-in-law was 34. And she said when Amber passed away, she fought it like crazy, and she wanted to win, but she didn't. She spent most of her days in the hospital, and looking back, I bet she would have just wanted to be at home, and especially if she was 75 years old. So she's like, I actually respect your mom's decision. It's like, oh, wow, like that's the first time I'd actually heard that. And I started to think through, what would it be like to make the choice to, instead of be angry at my mom and instead of have this bitterness and say, I'm not going to talk to you, I can't believe you're not going to fight for this, and instead have the power to choose to say, it's okay that you made this decision, I love you, and I'm going to choose love and empathy over anger. And so that's what I did, and I'm so glad I did, because she did pass away actually just in March. So we had a good year and a half of going to her house every Saturday, having pancakes and sharing a really special bond of love and empathy. And when I told her that I was okay with her decision, she just bawled and she just hugged me and said, thank you for understanding. So that is where I kind of started to lean into these methods of, I'd already had them in my mind through some of the stuff that I'd gone through the tornado, but going through another situation of adversity, I realized how important it is when you're faced with adversity to know that you have the power to decide what choice you're going to take. You're going to have the power. And I wish I could go back to the tornado and remember that I had the power to maybe take a better approach to the tornado, because after that happened, I would be kicking myself. I would be so upset. We were in a hotel for a long time, and I just remember going to bed, just being like, I'm so stupid. Why didn't we get a house with a basement? why did I tell my wife that this thing wasn't gonna hit us, it was just gonna hit the hills? Like, what is wrong with me? I just felt awful. Instead of realizing that I had the power to choose how I was going to have this adverse situation play out in my life. And so real quick, before I go to number 2, some of you might have adverse situations that you've gone through. Some of you may not yet, but you probably will. So as you think about these, think about when an adverse situation happens, I'm gonna remember PSI. So that's the goal here. So let's move to SMART, and this goes back to that hotel room after the tornado. I'm just kicking myself. And I'm really telling myself all the time, I'm so dumb. I did not take out enough insurance for this. I was getting calls, you can imagine after a tornado hits, there was a huge tree that fell on both of our cars, and the house was completely destroyed. So you're talking with insurance all the time. And you're thinking insurance would be able to take care of both the cars and the house, because, you know, we got them under the same roof like they show in commercials, you know, it's all under one. But it's not, because you gotta talk to the car department, then you gotta talk to the housing department, then you gotta talk to all these different people. And you just feel so dumb, because I don't know anything about insurance, and I just, why don't I know more about insurance? We didn't have a rental car after it smashed both cars, because I didn't put that in my policy to get a rental car. Because I was like, what are the chances that both cars will get smashed? If one car gets smashed, we'll have the other car. I'll save some money and not get rental replacement. So we're borrowing from neighbors, and it's super awkward, and it's just embarrassing. And I just continually tell myself, I'm not smart, I'm dumb. And this is what we're talking about, that flat tire that was starting to happen. And I started just to feel that every day. And I would wake up at 12:55 a.m. every single night for 3 months, reliving the whole thing. Body shaking, thinking about how dumb I was for not doing this, and you know, all these things that I could have done. And then, as I've thought through what's important to get through adversity, I've thought through how important this is to remind yourself that you're smart. To remind yourself that even if you aren't a professional in insurance, you are great at something. And when you go to bed, instead of thinking those things that you're dumb at, start thinking about the things you're smart at. And you don't even have to go through an adverse situation to do this. Hopefully, when you go to bed, you're thinking about good things, you're thinking about good thoughts, because that will manifest itself, that will become who you are. And people are attracted to people with good thoughts. I was a flat tire, understandably, just went through a tornado, but honestly, like, my friends were like, oh dude, I don't know if I'll hang out with you anymore, because I'm just like such a downer on myself. And so I realized how important it is for that smarts. And a lot of you probably know Henry Ford, right? Started the Ford company, and back when he was starting the company, the government was trying to get at him for some stuff and had him go to court, and the lawyer against him was trying to make him feel stupid and kept asking questions like, how many soldiers showed up in 1776, you know, and and asked all these random questions. And he finally said, hey, I know you're trying to make me out as a dummy, but honestly, why would I fill my mind with all this useless information when I have a desk full of buttons that I can hit, and I can ask anybody on my team the answer to any of those questions? And that was back in the 1930s. Now we have ChatGPT that we can ask. And so you just remember, you'll be an expert on something, but you don't have to have the answers to everything. So just remind yourself that you're smart. Remind yourself what you're smart in. Later on, I found out that I was dyslexic. So my daughter was struggling with reading, and they did this thing called the Barton system. And while she's doing that, and they learn that she has dyslexia, I'm like overhearing it, and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have learned this way. I don't know how to read very well either. And then realized that I was dyslexic, and then at the beginning I was like, oh man, I can't believe that. No wonder I did so bad at school, and but then when you start reading about dyslexia and all the crazy amount of percentage of people who are CEOs who are dyslexic, or just the way the dyslexic brain works and how it works to think differently, think outside the box, you realize, oh, actually, dyslexia can be a smart thing as well. So instead of just telling yourself, I'm dumb all the time, remind yourself how smart you are, especially during times of adversity. And that brings us to our last one, I, important. And this one is actually a year after the tornado. I was at my barber, which he doesn't cut much of my hair, just my beard. As I got older, it just kind of all moved down here, but he spent a lot of time on this beard. It takes a lot of effort to get this way. But I was in Nashville. We had lived in Nashville for 5 years before the tornado, and he had a one-chair barber shop. And I had gone there probably 3 weeks after we moved there, and just we clicked. And when you are in a one-chair barber shop, with someone, you get pretty close. We start talking about a lot of deep things. We had 5 years of relationship. And he was actually in East Nashville, right south of 5 Points, where he woke up in the middle of the night, heard the tornado, heard the jet engines, and was like, what is going on? And his door was like moving, and he got up and he was like, what? He touched the door, and he tried to open it, and the suction was too much where it kept it, but it didn't pop any of his windows. It didn't actually go over him. It was just up the road. So after the suction left, the sound left, and the suction where he could open up the door, he opened up the door, and 5 Points was just flat. So he got out and helped. And so he, obviously is like connected with this tornado. He said, John, it's been a year. Like, how are you doing? I said, honestly, Stephen, man, I'm struggling. I said, with tornado season coming up, like even if there's a 5% chance of a severe storm possible, I'm like physically shaking, have to take off of work, and I can't go. And it's embarrassing, and I don't really tell my kids, I don't tell my wife about it. I'm just kind of over there like having a physical reaction, being right back in that hallway, fighting for my life, whenever there's just a 5% chance. And he's like, John, he's like, you are important enough to invest in yourself. He's like, have you gone to counseling? I said, no. I was like, oh, we gotta take care of the kids, we gotta take care of everybody else. He's like, you are important enough to invest in yourself. So I want you to call a counselor and look into EMDR, which is a treatment that they do for people who have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of times it's vets and those types, but people who go through severe weather as well. And I did that, and it was weird, first of all, but honestly it changed my life. And it completely took away all that shaking and all of that. Now I'm like watching Twisters in the movie theater. I'm like, yeah, come on, let's go, and following all the guys on X on like Reed Timmer and the Dominator, driving in there and wishing someday I can do that. So it's kind of switched, changed my life, gave me a different definition because I decided that I was important enough to go to counseling and get that help. So when I think about this, obviously it's important for you to remember that you're important during adverse situations, but also think about somebody today who you might need to be their barber, right? You might need to be this, like Stephen was to me. Think about somebody today that you could text today and just remind them that they're important to you. It doesn't have to be weird, like, hey, you're important to me. Like, you just say something nice, or just say, hey, thinking about you, dude, like, let's grab coffee sometime, or whatever. Just think about somebody that you can do that today, because when you start to remember that other people are important, it does something weird. It kind of just reminds you that you're important as well. So I'd really encourage you to do that today. Be thinking about people that you can do that with. All right, so I'm going to end on this, and we can open up question and answers if you want that. So this is a picture 2 days before the tornado. So again, Green's 5, Carolina's 7, and we had gone to Home Depot that day. I think it was a Sunday. And we were all excited because we went to Home Depot to get these little bulbs that would turn into flowers. They all had their different colors: purple, red, yellow, white. And we all picked out. Carolina's like, I want the purple one. I want the red one. So we all did that, and we were planting them. We were so excited. And of course, 2 days later, you know what the house looked like. But that part of the yard was not hit by the tornado. And as we were cleaning up and everything, I looked over there and I started to see these little guys sprouting up. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, that didn't get totally destroyed like everything else. So I got a pot and I filled it up with some soil, and I dug out those little bulbs and put them into a little flower pot. I took them to, we had a rental house that we were in for a year just right up the road from this, so we could continue to get back and forth and salvage anything that was salvageable. And on the back porch, as I'm thinking through overcoming all this adversity, I see this, and these are our flowers on my back porch. And they had bloomed and they were incredible, and it's something that I remember when I think about a full life, when I think about overcoming adversity, I think about a flower blooming, I think about being able to see all the vibrant colors again. Because when you're going through adversity, and also when nobody understands, that was the thing with the tornado. How many people have been through a tornado? I didn't ask that question this morning, maybe some of you have, but there's not very many people when your brain's trying to process it, you're kicking yourself, and you're telling yourself all these negative things, and the power of knowing PSI, knowing that you have the power to choose how you respond, knowing that you're smart, and knowing that you're important, really can change the way that you look at adversity. So that's it. That's all I got. I don't know if there's any questions or anything, but I'd be happy to answer any of those. And I also have a book for all of you, even though I said I didn't come to teach tornado safety, I still have a huge passion about it. So I got this little tiny book that you can read in like 2 minutes, talking about the myths, and it interweaves my story. So give it to somebody or read it yourself, and just make sure that you're not stuck in the same situation that I got into where I wasn't prepared. Caroline, you want to hand out those books? And I'll take questions while she's handing it out.
Yeah. So how did you handle work and like everyday life after the tornadoes? Or like off university, like was you in mental state where it's hard to tell you all about something?
Definitely. Well, I was grateful. I don't know, how many of you know of Dave Ramsey, financial guy? Okay. That's who I was working for when I was out there. So I was really lucky to have a great employer who gave me 2 weeks completely off. Also, I don't know if you caught it, was March 3rd, 2020. Does anybody remember March 15th SEC tournament? Yeah. Complete shutdown, COVID happened. So that actually might have helped a little bit in me being able to feel like I could work on my stuff because the whole nation had completely shut down. So, but that's a good question. I think that's really important, is that, like, to allow yourself that time to be able to recoup, if you can, you know, and fight for it, because you're important enough to fight for it. So luckily I had an employer and a boss who was incredible, and gave me a lot of time and money and resources. Ramsey Company was incredible. So, yeah. But working for another company, that would be hard. So I might have to just be like, hey, I'm important enough to figure this out. I need some space. So, yeah.
How did you deal with like after the tornado, all the people like coming up and asking like, how are you? Like, how are you? And like, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, it was really bizarre that morning because this happened right at 1 o'clock in the morning. So then the news starts to roll out, and even people who lived 20 minutes south of us had no idea what was going on. And so there was one of my best friends. He was at the gym just working out, and then he saw the news. He's like, "John lives in Donaldson. John, are you okay?" And whenever they text that, they think they're gonna get a text back. He's like, "Yeah, we're good." Like, all right. And so I was like, "How do I text back?" I'm like, "Went through hell, terrible, awful, but we're all alive." Like some back and forth on texting that. I did actually. It's interesting that you say that because there were a lot of people who came to help from Red Cross or Samaritan's Purse or even just friends and family who had good intentions, but honestly said some stuff that was like, "Oh my God, you said that." So there's this book called Psychological First Aid that I read because it helps train first responders on how to not say a lot of things that people said to me. But you just have to have grace, and you have to remind yourself. Like after reading that book, I realized how difficult of a situation it is for people who come in, and they're just trying to help. So having that grace for them and saying, okay, they texted me something that like, what did you do that like God would send a tornado to hit your house? I'm like, I'm gonna have some grace for that person. I don't know why they said that, but I'm not gonna believe that. Okay, you know. So those types of things. Yeah.
Going back to your mom, was she on hospice ever? And
Yes.
how did you feel about that?
Yeah, so I was, it was one of those moments, right, where I had to kind of tell myself, one, that she actually, because she was a hospice nurse, that was something that she always wanted. And so even though it wouldn't have been something I chose for her, she was very happy to get the hospice care, and we were there to help her out. And so it was hard when she initially asked for it. In fact, like when she first asked for it, my sisters were like, "Why would you ask for hospice when you feel fine? Like you're fine, like everything's fine." And they just kept telling her like you're fine, because it hadn't like shown you, it was only stage 2. And but I was just like, "Hey Mom, I'm glad you're able to get hospice, and that's really important for you." And again, that meant a lot to her. So yeah, you just kind of have to choose how you're going to respond to those things.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how did you choose, how did you go about deciding, hey, I'm gonna share my story with others and kind of your journey to becoming a public speaker?
Yeah, well, so when I moved back to Kansas City, a lot of people didn't know my story because we're in Nashville. When I was working for Dave Ramsey, they're kind of a larger company, like 1,000 people, and they do this thing, staff meetings, and they have their Thanksgiving, where you can go up and say what you're thankful for. Anybody can go up and say. So I went and did that, and then afterwards, I got so many people coming to, John, what would I do if I would have been in that situation? How'd you overcome this? So that kind of made me think as soon as I started to just put myself out there, every time I told a story, somebody would ask, how does this work? So then, I actually, in this book, is from the notes section of my iPhone. When I would wake up at 12:55 a.m., we were in the hotel, so I would just like sneak off to the bathroom, sit on the edge of the bathtub, and just start typing out all my feelings and everything that happened minute by minute. And so I thought, well, that could maybe be helpful to people after they hear my story, to have something that they can, be able to understand, like how to keep themselves safe. And so I copied that, put it into a book, just put it through KDP. I mean, this is Kindle Direct Publishing. If you ever want to publish a book, it's pretty easy. You just go to set up a KDP account and drop a Word document in there, make a little cover on Canva, and boom, you're a published author. So it's really not that exciting. But then that opens up more opportunities to even, like today, was just the fact that I had this book, my friend Alex had read this book, and then was knowing that I wanted to just get my story out there, that it worked out for me to be here. So, and then I think the PSI was something that I'd worked on for a while and just started to feel more and more comfortable with, and seeing how my story worked through that, and then with my mom, I felt like that was important too, because that was a very healing thing. I was really glad that I did that. Instead of choosing it.
Any other questions? Alright, before I let you go, I have one more question for you. What is one piece of advice you would give all of these, knowing they're high school students, they have a lot of life ahead, who knows what their, adversities they might face in the future? What's one piece of advice you have for them?
Yeah. Well, I would say that when you see somebody going through adversity, remember what they're going through and have so much empathy and love for them. And even though it's awkward sometimes to reach out, like there were people who didn't reach out to me after the tornado, and it was a little, not that I was like keeping tabs, like, oh, this person, but it was like awkward because later they're like, oh yeah, I saw you went through that, I just wasn't sure if I should text you or not. I'm like, dude, just text me, like, unless you text me something awful, but like text me just like, hey, thinking about you, love you. Like that's all I really needed. I didn't need a whole long thing. So obviously, like, remember these key principles when you go through adversity, but also when you see other people go through adversity, just make sure you reach out to them and let them know that they're loved and they're special, because that means a lot. It goes a long way. Yeah. Thank you.
Alright, you guys have anything? John, thank you so
Yeah,
much. We
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.